We recommend listening to the CW Pod with a glass of Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Grown, distilled, well-rested, and bottled in Erling, Iowa. Now from the Channel Seed Studios, this is the CW Pod, fueled by Steeple Ridge.
It is championship week. It's so much fun being able to say that. And I had to bring in, I called an audible. I actually had another interview lined up for this week. And I was like, I got to get Eric Heft in here. How are you, sir?
I'm great. It's great to have championship week, but they have it every year. Sometimes you don't get to participate. Participation is great.
It changes everything. That bottle of Steeple Ridge Bourbon in front of you is yours, my friend. Thank you for coming in today.
You know me. I like my bourbon.
I said it to Aiden before you came in. I'm like, Heft will actually drink the whiskey we're about to give him. Because I think a lot of people were just like, it's a cool bottle, right? Oh. It's our Iowa Everywhere bottle. It's ingrained there, and it's a cool. I'm like, no, I think Heft will actually drink this. So enjoy that.
I'll sample it tonight.
Thank you, my friend. I'm glad. We are presented by Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Remember this for your holidays. I love getting a bottle of whiskey for the holidays, and you can support a great local business who, the cool thing about Steeple Ridge, everything in this bottle is made on Pat's farm out in Erling. Everything from the water to the grains to everything. It's a really neat product. And you can buy it. Most liquor stores in the state of Iowa have this. If not, request it. That's how you can help our friend Pat Hoffman and his family grow. Eric Heft is with me, and yeah, we're kind of getting ready for Dallas. But I on Saturday night, the win was awesome. We've had like cool wins where we all get to experience like fun things, but like the last time anything like that happened was during COVID. The West Virginia game, and it was just different because it was like half the stadium.
Not even.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it was like a quarter of the stadium. How special was Saturday night for you? And just not to be ageist, but the old timers who have been around for so many painful years. Your stories about you and Pete and calling these 1-11 seasons. How cool was that for you?
Oh, it was really cool, but it's been cool even in the 1-10s or whatever, because just love being around it. We've always had, for the most part, great people to work with. I've only worked with 2 play-by-play guys, Pete and John, and 2 of my best friends ever. Mm-hmm. So been lucky there. But the coaches we've worked with, and even when things didn't go well, whether it's Jim Walden, or whomever, Paul Rhodes at the end, still loved those guys.
Yeah.
And loved the players and just wanted the best for them. Always disappointing that, they didn't have more success in the long term. But since Matt's been here, and Matt's just an awesome guy for sure.
Yeah.
And his whole staff, just so happy for them. And obviously the guys who put in the work every day, just thrilled for them. And I'm just along for the ride, and I'm a fan. I enjoy it. But yeah, it was pretty special.
It's a lot more fun when they win, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've always said I shouldn't tell Learfield this, but it's like I'm underpaid in a 1-10 season, and I'm overpaid, in a 10-2 season.
I understand. Yeah, no, I actually started off our podcast on Saturday night. I said something similar that, like with the Vikings, I'm a diehard Vikings fan and a Braves fan, and I'm a fan of the team. It doesn't matter who's playing for it. Like, I'm just a fan of the team. With Iowa State, I've just become such a fan of the people. And that's not limited to the coaches and the people in the Jacobson building. It's the fans that I've got to meet along the way, and just the amount of just quality human beings. That's what I was so happy for on Saturday night.
Absolutely. I mean, the people, I don't know. We were inside, but it was cold. My wife and friends sat out.
Good for her.
And for them to show up the way they showed up, the way they showed the support, it obviously means a lot to a lot of people, not just us. And so that was fantastic. Happy for them too. It's like they've had to wear that cup a long time.
Oh yeah.
And Didn't need it Saturday night. Thought we might for a while.
Well, when he missed that field goal at the end, it got a little dicey.
Like,
what went through your mind?
It's never easy.
You said that on the air.
Well, that's what. Well, Dave Starr was a former sports information director, and going back to the '80s and early '90s, and that was a saying he always had. He'd say, "It's never easy."
Even the BYU game afterwards, they had to put us through hell.
Yeah, I'm driving home and taking Cap, my buddy who spots for us, driving him out into Clive, and we're listening, and it's coming down right to the end. And of course, he's like, "Oh, they're gonna blow this. They're gonna lose this game." I said, Is BYU even trying?"
I was getting a lot of that. Yormark called in because he wanted Colorado to be in the championship game. My Twitter feed was blowing up about that.
Yeah, I'm sure the networks really wanted that too, but hey.
Well, this Iowa State team.
Screw them.
Yeah, no kidding. I don't think we probably. I think we'll, after the season, look back on like the defensive injuries probably more. When you're in the season, it's kind of like next man in, right? Like, but man, like they've lost a lot of guys.
Lost a lot of guys.
Like, it's crazy.
It's kind of every team has injuries, and some years it just goes where it's for Iowa State this year, 2 position groups, obviously linebackers and tight ends.
Yep.
I mean, and had other injuries elsewhere too, but I mean, decimated where you're down, farther than you wanted to be. And so that's the way Iowa State's been able to come through. And the word I've used, after every game, because we have a thing at the end of the game called "What's the story of the game?" And for a lot of games, it's been resilience. I mean, just keep playing, play harder, longer, and find a way to win. And I think that's one of the things I love about this group. And but yeah, the linebacker thing certainly has hurt Iowa State. I mean, there's no question. You take your best guys out. There's a reason why those guys were starting. And so, but the guys that come in have given tremendous effort, and they've improved greatly over the course of the season. Big story of the last few weeks has been Jack Sadowski, the guy who started every game as a true freshman last year. And he's given Iowa State a real boost in the middle. And I think that's helped. Obviously, getting Will McLaughlin back, speaking of somebody close to Erling.
Yeah, you're right.
Defiance. But those things have really kind of helped that. And Dom Orange stepping up.
Oh, man, he's been so good. And
after, just kind of somewhat underperforming for a guy of his physical ability. And now he's kind of taking the bull by the horns, and the center by the horns, and the guard and everybody else, and throwing them in the backfield. That's made a huge difference. And that has really made life for the linebackers a lot better too.
Yeah. Did you feel on Saturday night, the crowd was, we always call it the sicko crowd, like when these cold weather games, but
the no shirt guys.
Oh yeah. That was one of my buddies chronicled that.
We had a bet up in the booth.
What was that?
How many guys are going to be out there in no shirts? We never got a final count, but the over would have won.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, no, it's too cold. There might be a couple guys, but there was more than a couple.
Oh, yeah. I never understood why the players will warm up. You're an old athlete. Is that purely psychological to warm up without a shirt on a night like? Because it seems stupid to me, but I'm not exactly tough either.
I tell you what, I would be bundled up. Okay. But some guys, have that, that mentality of like, I'm going to show the world how tough I am. And if they back it up on the field, go for it. But for me, I'm going to stay warm when I can stay warm, and then do what I have to do after that.
So a lot has been made of, like in Hilton Coliseum, you've called a million games there. The crowd always believes that they can win, that Iowa State can win. And the crowd will often will you to a win, if we believe in that or not.
I believe in it.
Did you feel that in Jack Trice Stadium on Saturday night? Because I think that you could make an argument that it's been like nervous energy in the past because you expect bad things to happen. Even when Conradi missed the kick, it was kind of like we all got nervous, but it didn't feel like a woe is me type crowd. What did you have a feeling?
Well, I don't have the sense of the crowd as much because I'm sitting up in a booth with a headset on, and so I don't really catch the crowd vibe. However, I'd have to believe that things changed this year, and they changed because of the way Iowa State's been able to come back, what Rocco's been able to do in those final drives. I know he didn't have his best game the other day, but he still played well enough.
Clutch spots.
Which has been his DNA throughout this season. Just go back to the Iowa game. I mean, UCF game, even the Tech game, even though Iowa State didn't win it. Cincinnati game, getting the late score to put that game away. All those things, I think that kind of changes. I mean, Hilton Magic wasn't Hilton Magic when I played there. I mean, it was a great place and great crowds, but not like it is now. Things happened that created Hilton Magic. Sometimes the success they had fueled the crowd, and the crowd started believing, and it's this huge snowball rolling down the hill. And I think we're starting to see that in football with hey, you know what? We can come back and win a game. If you go back to Brock Purdy, I mean, how many times was he able to lead us back at the end of games? I mean, not a lot. Rocco has done that, and I think that's one of the things. Sometimes it doesn't show up in the numbers, but you watch him and you see and you believe that he's going to be able to do it. Now he's got some great weapons for sure, but the belief that team has in him, I think, and I think the crowd I'm sure is picking up on that too. It's we got a chance.
And also, these teams constantly just take on the personality of their coach. And I feel like the crowds kind of do that too.
I think that's fair.
Right? I mean, I always use Finley as a great example. Like the women's basketball crowds at Iowa State are crazy. Right? And because Bill was very early on in his career, much more so than now, very demonstrative and yelled a lot and all, and he'd be the first to admit it. We've talked about it with him. I don't know. Campbell, to me, just the way that he has conducted himself and spoken publicly during how he's just solid, right?
Consistency of message.
Right? Do you think Iowa State fans are following along now when it comes to that? It's not always the end of the world when something bad happens, and you're not the best team in the country when you win a game either?
Well, I think so. I mean, 9 years is proof in the pudding. Iowa State has had winning records in the Big 12, 7 of those 9 years. I never thought I would say that.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
7 of the last 8. I mean, first year obviously was a reset, but 7 of the last 8 years had a winning record in conference play. I mean, the fact that in his first, 5 years, he defeated every team in the league home and away. Did you think that was going to happen?
No,
I didn't either.
And they were playing that Big 12 round robin too, which was really tough.
Exactly. I mean, there were you played everybody. So, I mean, those things, I think that kind of inspires a real belief, and you kind of embrace it. Hey, this message is one. Everybody's got a message. Everybody's got a culture. Some are better than others. And Matt's has been terrific. But I go back in my mind to one thing that stood out to me, because I've been around coaches. I mean, not so much, Johnny Majors and Earl Bruce, but some really, really outstanding coaches that we've had here. I think this is my position, that Matt Campbell's the first coach that Iowa State has had that in his heart of hearts has believed that he could win the conference. I don't think anybody else really thought. I mean, we can be good. We can be up there. We can, in 8 games, 9 games, whatever. But I don't know that anybody ever really thought, okay, in their heart of hearts, believed that they were going to win this league, the Big 8, the Big 12, whatever league it was. And in my mind, Matt's believed it since day one. We can find a way, figure out a way to do it. We have a system we believe in. Now, some coaches may have come in that first year, but I'll say this: after maybe a year or two, they're kind of like, "Oh, buddy, this is going to be really hard." So,
well, the other thing about Matt that I find really interesting, and I haven't been around nearly as long as you have, but I've had a cup of coffee here, and I've always noticed in every sport, other than women's basketball, because that Bill's just been here forever, but the coaches generally seem like when they come in, And I would think that this is the case at most places too. I don't think this is limited to Iowa State, but this is what differentiates Matt. TJ, it's still too early. I think he hasn't been here long enough to be able to tell. But when they come in, they're very open. They're very happy. They're everything's optimistic, right? Because you haven't had a chance to prove yourself right or wrong. You're selling a vision. You're selling a dream. And then usually there's a spike. Everybody's in love with you. And then it's easy, I think, to become jaded because you know how hard you're working. All these guys and men and women are working really hard. You have to be really talented to get to the point where you're a head coach in the Big 12. And then you can become jaded because it's like, well, they're not appreciative. And then they can shut down. I've seen this so much where they almost become bitter a little bit. I don't know. Towards the end, and then you get kicked out, and then we just start the cycle over again. Matt has just been he's just been steady the whole time. I haven't felt a peak or a valley.
I think that's fair.
Is it? Okay.
I mean, I think, sometimes people get defensive. And 2 years ago, Matt could have gotten really defensive. Some fans were unhappy with him. I mean, it's like something my wife told me a long time ago. And this is true of fans of any team. I don't want much, just more. And if you win 7 games, well, gosh, how about 8?
Yeah.
You win 8. Now we've won 10. Well, how about 11? And next year, all those things, and those things aren't always deliverable. And they don't always happen. And so that's when somebody, a segment of your fan base, and everybody has a right to their own opinion, but it's like, I think he's kind of peaked here. Mm-hmm. But Matt doesn't let that bother him.
No.
And I think that once again, I go back to the consistency of his message and the story he believes in, what he believes in, how you win football games. Knowledge of what Iowa State is. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's never wavered from the statement that Iowa State, is a developmental program. I mean, we're not going to have top 10 recruiting class. Doesn't mean we can't beat top 10 teams, but we have to do it a different way than some other schools. And that core belief that he's never wavered from, I think it served him well, and I think it served him well in a tough year a couple of years ago.
I almost wonder too if it's going to be an advantage going forward. Just going off of this year, because it looks like around college football, there's still really good teams. Mm-hmm. None of them seem as deep as they were because
the portal part of it.
Yeah, right. But Iowa State, I would make an argument that the reason that they're 10-2 going to play for the Big 12 championship is because of depth. When you look at the amount of guys they've had to go through this year, and I just wonder, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, see what you think about it. The fact that they haven't had to go crazy in the portal, or for one reason, because they can't, right? Well, Iowa State can't go out and buy 20 players like Ole Miss can. It's just true. But they've kept younger guys and developed them, and a guy like Rylan Barnes, sure he's not playing right now, but he played some really good reps for Iowa State in the middle. They're not going to win a couple of those games if he's not ready to go in, right? Like I just wonder if it's an advantage going forward.
I think that's part of it, but I think great staff. I think this is Matt's best staff that he's had. He never had a bad staff here, but I think this is like a super cohesive staff that has 100% buy-in from all the coaches. They're all pulling in the exact same direction. Not a lot of debates about how we're going to do this. And that consistency also resonates with the players. And I think you have players who are hungry to be here, whether it's Rylan Barnes or Bo Goodwin, young guys who've come in. They know they have to get better. The coaches command their attention just because of who they are. And so that's how your depth is developed. I mean, obviously, Rylan Barnes was, practicing with the scout team, 3 days, before he stepped in against Baylor, and was ready to do the job. But I think the whole coaching thing is tremendous. And that is how you build depth. You're right. Iowa State doesn't want to get a ton of players in the portal. We're playing a team tomorrow night in Marquette in basketball, and they're the number 5 team in the country. Shaka Smart doesn't take anybody in the portal. He develops them. So he understands who he is and who Marquette is, and just like Matt understands. But in our case, I mean, we've done a good job in the portal. Just TJ's done a great job in the portal. Matt's done a great job in the portal. Not everyone's a hit, but without Dylan Barrett, Jalen Travis, we're not playing Saturday.
Correct.
So
it's got to be choosy.
You got to be choosy about, and the guys who fit who you are, fit your culture. And
I'm glad you mentioned them because the linemen don't get enough play, but I mean, you're dead on. Both of those guys have just been massive.
Huge, and they've really helped, up Iowa State's ability to win football games. Everyone hasn't been a hit. A couple of the receivers, maybe not as much for sure. And Kennard Snyder's been hurt, so we don't know. He's still got another year, so we don't know long term about some of those guys. But it's the selectiveness of who they've picked up. Jaden Higgins was a pretty good pickup too. I don't know if you picked up on that.
He's so good. He's a cheat code.
He is so good, and so so the hits there. Just
nice guy too.
Just like TJ has done in basketball. Find the guys who are the right fit. Good players who can maybe thrive in this system, but understand who we are. And be willing to embrace it. And I think both Matt and TJ have done a tremendous job of that.
I wanted to pick your brain on something. Again, I that's why I like hanging out with you, because I will often think things and I just say it. Even remember when I was up in the press box a couple of weeks and you called me out on it when I said I'd rather lose a game 55-50 than 20-19, and then after the Kansas game, you're like, "You still mean that?" You keep me in check. This is good. I said the other night, and this is a massive statement, and I probably didn't have any business saying it, but it's just my opinion of what I think John Haycock's the best position or assistant coach I've ever seen come through Iowa State in any sport. I mean, I don't know how you can argue. Well, do you agree? Like, the guy, like 19 James, right? And Deion Broomfield gets a lot of credit for this, but he, look at him in that Kansas game, and then look at him on Saturday night against Kansas State. He was phenomenal. Like the development, like it just, when I saw Verdon in street clothes, I said to Aiden next, it's over. 9-3 is a good season.
Not very reactionary there at all.
See, this is my problem. I just got to learn to shut my mouth. I want to give Haycock his love. I think he's so special.
I think one of the hardest things for people who aren't around the program, and I'm not around it as much as maybe I should be or could be, but is to really understand the impact of assistant coaches and what they bring to the table. How good are they? I mean, people, that is a really hard thing to quantify. However, 9 years here, and this defense has been outstanding virtually all the time. If you look at second half scoring, so the true measure is, okay, we give up a touchdown early. I wish you wouldn't do that. Well, yeah, everybody wishes you wouldn't do that. But the ability to adjust and shut a team down in the second half. I mean, even in the Kansas game, they scored one offensive touchdown in the second half. Go through the 2020 season. I think the last 5 games or something, it was like they gave up like 28 points in the second half of all those games combined.
Even the 4-8 year of 22, the defense was really good.
Exactly. And puts you in position. And you're doing this without, I think, one of the scarcest, without a plethora of the scarcest commodity in football, and that is big, athletic defensive linemen. You've done it with some guys that are good. Now, Dom Orange, and this is one of the best groups we've had, for sure, in the last few years. But that has always been, first of all, who is going to be a great defensive lineman? Well, it's got to be big. He's got to be athletic, and he's got to have just a touch of crazy in him. The gene pool, there's not many out there.
No.
And, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, they got a whole bunch of them. They're hogging that gene pool. And so we've had to do it with a bunch of guys who are good and tremendous scheme, and everybody understanding you're one of 11, and you have to do your job. And I think that is a message. First of all, how many guys have we ever had at Iowa State as a coach who has put in a system that's unique to college football? I mean,
And now they're stealing it in the pros.
they're stealing it everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, and eventually he'll adapt. I mean, he's tweaked it over the years, and he'll have to tweak it going forward. Who knows? Maybe next year will be we do something completely different. I doubt it, but he's the guy who could do that, because that's what he did, 8 years ago, and it's turned our program around. So
That's one of the best stories, isn't it? It was the Akron game. Iowa State won by like 21 points, 25 points, something like that. But Campbell was just pissed because they had so many third down conversions, right? Wasn't that it?
I just remember, like, the game's over, and I'm an Ohio guy. And of course, obviously, so's Matt, and my sister and her husband and their family lived in Akron. And anyway,
I didn't know that.
It was kind of a big. Well, actually, my grandparents lived in Massillon. Okay,
Really?
yeah. So,
And that's where Matt's from, for the audience who may not know.
yes. But anyway,
Crazy.
it's like the game's over, and I'm just happy we won. And I go down to do the locker room, and you're right. He's like,
Hurt, yeah.
he's ready to throw everybody under the bus, man. He is mad. And I'm like, wow. Rarely have a coach, even as though it's a MAC team, to win by 20 or whatever it was on the road. And, that's not how we're going to win here. That's not it. And it's like, well, the result was good. But at the same time,
But he was looking at, where is this going?
what is sustainable about what we do? And some of the things in that game he didn't feel were sustainable in the long term unless it got corrected, which it did. But still, so I definitely remember that. I was kind of surprised, to be honest.
Well, and you want to talk about culture change. I mean, there's not many, I would guess, times in your career prior to that where Iowa State football would win a game by double digits and the coach is upset.
Oh, definitely. I can't remember. I mean, for me, at the end of the game, if we win, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I mean, never had a bad win, barring, losing, having a season-ending injury or something like that.
That Drake game test you? I'm just saying.
Oh man, playing on it was like, playing in greased lightning. I mean, just a greasy field.
My story from that game, my press box seat is right next to the away radio guy. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go and strangle our friend Chuck Reed. He was calling the Drake game.
Right, sure.
I had to get up and leave.
Oh man, yeah.
He was excited. I don't blame him.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was like unbelievable.
Yeah,
I'll give a shout out to Drake football and basketball too. By the way,
they're doing great.
I think Stepsis must be a terrific coach. I mean, they won the league twice in a row, and their new basketball coach,
man, they're cooking.
They're solid too. So I give a shout out to the Bulldogs there for sure. But,
no doubt.
But no, that game, wow, that was just
Yeah, I'm sorry I brought that up. This is supposed to be a fun podcast.
That was stressful, way more than it obviously should have been. But once again, got the win, and and Matt wasn't necessarily happy after the game. He was happy it was over, and done with.
That was one of those just relief type moments. Yeah, the other thing was Mauser. I wanted to bring up because the offense is so interesting. It hasn't been. If you would have asked me preseason, I think I would have expected bigger, sexier numbers. It's been so substantive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was really doing a deep dive on the numbers from the whole season last night. And I think that it's just been rock solid across the way. I don't know, with basketball, it's we expect a top 5 defense the last few years. None of that, but they're good at everything. I don't know. What do you think of Mauser in the first year?
I think he's done a great job. I mean, number one, you don't win 10 games without doing something right. And offensive coordinators, I mean, that's the easiest target for fan bases. It's play doesn't work, it's a bad call, and a lot of plays don't work. You're playing against some teams that are pretty good at stopping what you're trying to do. So I think his creativity has been good. Sometimes what you're doing is trying to set something up later too. And
He does that a lot.
he believes. I mean, and I think most coaches believe that you have to find a way to run the football. You have to have the threat of running the football, and even if you're not having success. Saturday night was a great example. How much success did we have early? And if you'd have told me at the end of the first quarter or midway through the second quarter that we were going to outrush Kansas State, I'd have said you're crazy. Mm-hmm. But we did.
Yeah.
Just stay with it and keep pounding away, finding, and then, if you can get a little run game going, play action is a wonderful friend. And when you've got the weapons on the outside that Iowa State has, man, that has been absolute gold.
Good point on the.
And first of all, Mauser's call with the Hansen to Burkle throw.
Well, that's where I was going to go because, but to your point, it was brilliant, right? What if Hansen overthrows him by an inch? Then we're all like, hey, why is he having the running back throw it, right? It's a terrible job when it comes to people judging you.
Absolutely, yeah. If he had thrown a pick there, that would have been awful, but.
Such a great play call.
Setup was so perfect. You showed a look that it's third and short, and showed a look that we had done, countless times, and even earlier in that game. And then, except Burkle just kind of acts like he's going to block and misses.
Great.
Whiffs the block, and by the way, I'm wide open.
I love the creativity that he has. It feels like every game he just adds something to it, and it's just. I'm an offensive geek. I think I know more than I do, but you can see sprinkles of mesh and the air raid in there, and then he's got 3 tight ends, and then it's so much fun to watch what they come up with.
And that triple I.
Yeah. What the hell is that?
It's it worked early. They kind of figured out, okay.
Yeah.
So they haven't really gone to it much lately, but it's still there.
But Taylor, he's like a mad scientist, and he reminds me of these old school offense guys that you could just see him in there cooking things up. I can see him in there on Sunday afternoons watching these NFL games and taking notes.
Well, and the other thing too, I talked about staff, and this. The fact you have a number of guys on that offensive staff who have been offensive coordinators.
Yeah,
and we ask him about it. It's always. His answer is always pretty much the same. It's such a collaborative process that all these guys, some really good minds in that offensive room, get together. So it's not just him. It's that whole staff and what they're able to come with. Now, play calling, that's a different animal.
Yeah.
And I think that would be incredibly hard. But I think he's done a great job.
One of my favorite things, too, about his staff is how he promotes guys. I just think it builds. You talk about get everybody moving in the same direction. It's not always the case, but when you reward a guy and promote it, and then the younger guys on your staff see that, it's just like that carrot, right? No wonder they're all so loyal to him.
And when you hire these guys, that they know what they're getting in for. It's it's not, is this guy going to be a good culture fit or not? It's well, he's already shown that he is. So absolutely, that's been great, and bringing a guy like, an Iowa State guy back like Broom,
oh yeah. What a great fit that's been.
So that's been a great fit too. So, and Colby Cratch, who was gone and, after he went to North Texas and, had an opportunity to be a, full-time, guy, position coach, and then he comes back. He knew the system too. He knew what Iowa State culture was all about. So, and talk about a guy's had challenges.
Probably an underrated job he's done this year.
Yeah. When you consider, he's the linebacker coach, and this has been whew. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he knew all those guys' names before, but he got to know them up close and personal as they come into games.
Well, a really interesting game. We're in the Channel Seed Studios, of course, presented by Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Arizona State we had an idea Iowa State had a chance to be in this game at the beginning of the year. I think we all believed that this team was good enough to be in this spot. not a shocking. Man, they were buried in the Big 12 preseason rankings, which turned out to mean absolutely nothing.
The single worst preseason poll in any sport by anybody ever.
You know what? I didn't vote in it this year because I said this. I'm on the record, Aiden. You can go back. I was like, I don't know anything about these. In the portal era, we don't know. It's impossible.
Right.
Like, it really is impossible.
You look, and it's like, what, four of the top 5 teams in preseason are the bottom teams.
They're the worst
in the league, and obviously the worst, or the last place pick is playing for the championship. It is crazy. What happened at Oklahoma State? I mean,
I have no idea.
Everybody talked about Iowa State having, however many started, 18 or whatever it was back. Oklahoma State was equal.
They had like 20 players back or something.
They had all these guys back, and they were good last year.
They're with their running game with Ollie Gordon, and they're in like the 115s in rush offense. Yeah. It's one of the most staggering statistics I've ever seen.
And Alan Bowman,
yeah,
just wasn't good enough. That's part of it. But just to quit, the whole team. That's one of the problems you can run into. I've heard of senioritis. They have a lot of guys with experience that lose success, and then they're thinking, okay, what's next for me? And next thing you know, the whole season circling the drain. And that was just, to me, that was the
shocking.
Craziest one. Utah, I could see a little bit, because of everybody was banking on Cam Rising, who is an elite quarterback, and there was nobody semi-elite after him, after he was out. That put them in a hole. Still a little surprised that they finished where they did, but no, the Oklahoma State one is the biggest one to me, and Kansas to some extent, although they redeemed themselves a little bit, but not quite enough to get to bowl eligibility. But they won 3 tremendous games in a row and they had a lot of other games they could have won. So sometimes that's how your season goes. A little bit how Iowa State's went a couple of years ago.
And that says a lot about Leipold, too, the fact that he could keep that train on the track.
One of the things I was looking at, though, and, of course, they're significant portal players, too. Like, they have, 18 seniors starting. And a lot of 2-deep guys that are seniors. So, where do they go next year? Jalen Daniels is not coming back. Pretty sure of that. It'll probably be Ballard at quarterback. But I wonder where they're going. I think they're in a kind of a precarious situation going forward.
The Arizona State team that Iowa State is about to get has one of the premier running backs in college football. And
a great story.
And he's an amazing story. Dillingham is top 5 guy on the podium. Don't miss that guy's press conference. He was awesome yesterday. If you're an Iowa State fan, go and watch that press conference. He loved up on Matt Campbell.
He did. I had no idea that he had been at Iowa State. Been to Iowa State too.
So apparently he's friends with Tyson Vite. That's what I got out of that. And Tyson invited him to near. He came over and watched practice for a couple days.
Yeah. So, coaches will go in spring to see other places, but the thing that got me was how impressed he was with Matt. It was just, he's a good guy who can have fun, enjoy things, and then still command, but the consistency, that's why he wanted to visit Iowa State, was how has he done it here in a place without all the traditional assets, and how has he done it? And he is super impressed, and I think certainly has taken some lessons.
He was using the "be the best version of yourself" line. He kind of sounded like Matt up there.
Yeah,
it just in a little more of a animated.
I say a little more energetic at the podium anyway, and certainly very energetic on the sideline too.
Well, they're a great story, and they're a really good football team. I'm kind of just starting to dive too deep on them, but what do you think of the matchup for Iowa State?
I haven't gotten real deep into it yet, but they're going to be aggressive. They're going to try to play physical, but they're going to try to play fast defensively, and Iowa State's going to have answers for that. Love their quarterback, freshman, who started at Michigan State.
A couple games, yeah.
And then so it's a redshirt freshman. He can make all the throws, and he's got good wheels. Losing their wideout, though.
It's big.
I mean, Tyson was fantastic. I mean, he was their Jaden Higgins, and they didn't have a Jalen Knoll to go with him.
Yeah, he had twice as many receptions as the next guy on the team.
Right, 1,100 yards and big play. Man, the games I've seen, a couple of games that I saw, and frankly, I saw 2 games that they were fantastic. So I haven't had a chance yet to look at the games that they lost. But boy, their offense is just so dynamic. We have to find a way once again to slow down the running game, and something Iowa State's gotten better at the last couple of weeks. They're going to have to be really good at that. Scattaboo is man. He is a.
He deserves to be on some Heisman ballots.
He's John Riggins, you know. I mean, going way back. But he's a guy hard to get down, but he's super aggressive and finishes plays tremendously. Can catch it out of the backfield, and he's a tough one-on-one tackle out in space.
The other thing I noticed, both of these teams really possess the football a lot.
Absolutely.
Turnovers are going to be really critical because this feels like a low possession game to me.
It could be, you know, and you never know how
both teams are top 15 in time of possession. I saw
right, and say they want to run the football, they want to play action pass and get the quarterback involved in the run game. For Iowa State, I mean, we're not going to get the quarterback involved in the run game a lot, but we're going to have to figure out a way to have some success on the ground, and then see what they do. I mean, teams have really schemed defensively so much against the combination of Higgins and Knoll. I mean, we have to have that third guy. Burkle's has been good,
and he's come on really well.
He has. He's been a huge boost for Iowa State offensively, in an area where I kind of thought he was just going to be that blocker, you know, and catch a pass or two. But he's really developed into, you know, a guy that you can go to. And I go back even, well, a year ago, start of fall, and I'm asking some of the guys, so who do you think is going to emerge at tight end? And they said, well, the Bramer kid's good, which I'd seen, and that was pretty obvious. But they said, no, Gabe Burkle he's going to be the guy. You know, well, he was kind of hurt and dinged, and then Bramer came on. But they've had high hopes for him for a long time, and it's great to see that come to fruition, especially at a time when somebody had to step up. And you know, he certainly was able to do that.
Well, it'll be special. I kind of wanted to as well just reflect on how many years have you been doing this now?
This is my 46th year of basketball, 41st of football, so a while.
That's incredible.
I started when I was 7.
But you still, I mean this, not just because you're one of my heroes. Like you haven't lost a step. Like I'm serious. Like you're very sharp. You look great. Playing golf all the time.
Not enough.
How you swinging the clubs right now? Not much right now.
They say they're in hibernation. It's kind of off-season golf, but no, I love what I do, and I never take for granted ever how lucky I am to be able to do this for a school that I love.
Yeah. Well, and you obviously play basketball at Iowa State, but you know what's shocking to me though, because I'm kind of becoming an old guy. In the business.
Happens.
I know it happens.
I mean, with any luck.
Well, a lot of these kids don't know like that you used to play basketball at Iowa State. Mm-hmm. Like, did you know that, Aiden? Did you? Aiden's probably a little bit different because he's a nutty, like crazy. But like the amount of like our interns and stuff that we have who don't know anything about the Paul Rhodes era, like is shocking to me because it just feels to me like it was yesterday.
You know, I'm going to tell a little story on you.
Oh boy!
I mean, it's not really on you, but I just remember when you first started, and you and Bloom. Of course, see now I've known Bloom's dad since before there was a Brent.
Oh, okay,
so no, but anyway, and so I knew Brent just a little bit. But you guys were starting out, and one of the things I thought at the time, I mean, I appreciate that there's somebody out here really trying to push all this Iowa State, but when I would hear you say something like, "Oh, he's the best defensive end in Iowa State history," and I think, "Well, you've seen 3."
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And I'm thinking, you know, I go back to some of the guys that I was in school with, and I'm thinking, lack of perspective.
Oh, I get it.
You know, and the recency bias, if you will.
I don't like even reading my old stuff.
Yeah, and I single you out only because we're here, but it happens everywhere, and I'm sure I was a victim of that too, because
you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And now that you've had a chance to see more, you realize, wow, there was, I go back in the 70s. I mean, my sophomore year was the first bowl game in Iowa State history. They went back my junior year, and then 76, 77, 78, 3 consecutive 8-3 seasons. There were a lot of really good football players. And you go back when I was in school, I came in, Johnny Majors was here, and it was a splash hire, kind of a maybe risky hire a little bit.
Sorry, Dippy's messing with the camera. If you saw the little shake right there, we got the dog in the studio.
But I go back, and the players that we got out of Florida and Georgia, because frankly, the SEC schools didn't take black players, and we were able to get guys like Barry Hill, Lonnie Coleman, Willie Jones, some guys that were tremendous, Big Daddy Hunt, tremendous players. Ike Harris, I mean, guys that played in the NFL. Frankly, today we'd have a really very difficult time landing any of those guys.
And that's where I love the internet. I'm obviously very passionate about. It's not new media anymore, but it was when we were getting started. I wish that we had more literature on that era.
Not much video.
There's not much out there.
Yeah.
There's the Dirty 30 documentary that Cyclones TV did with Crochelle and all, Rod and Jeff and all. And it's great. I've watched it a bunch. It's so hard to learn about Iowa State's past. And I don't know what the answer is. We just need. I put that upon myself with Cyclone Fanatic. We need to get Crochelle on the record, on the record, and really chronicle some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I go back, and my love for football was early. I mean, but being around those guys, the guys I knew, the Barry Hills, the Ike Harrises, and guys that came in the same group. Jerry Moses was the #1 running back in the country that Iowa State signed. It's the same year that I was signed. He was from Waterloo. And while things never worked out for him because of injuries, but that was a sign, man, Iowa State is a coming program. And then, when Johnny decided to leave for Pitt, about the time we were trying to get a new stadium, and then Earl comes in and really did a terrific job, but completely different style. I mean, Johnny Majors at the time would have been considered the modern guy. I mean, he's going to try all different things. And then Earl came in, and he's out of the Ohio State. Woody Hayes, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and it was a real hard adjustment for our fans until we won 8 games 3 years in a row. And then, of course, Woody Hayes had to punch a guy, and then Earl went to Ohio State, which is the only place he would have left for.
I always try to I kind of call like McCarney on the modern era. And anything before that, it's just hard. I know enough about Walden. There's a lot of Walden guys who are still around who have told me great stories. But there's just that little pocket in between like 75 to McCarney where I feel like there's just not much out there for fans to be able to learn.
Yeah, I mean, the Donnie Duncan era was one of, not quite good enough, and then followed by Jim Kreiner, who, once again, not quite good enough, and also got us on probation. And then Walden came in, who was a breath of fresh air. Left Washington State, where he'd had success, to come here, which was, and he had some success, but again, he just kind of got bogged down. And he didn't recruit Iowa. I mean, if Iowa offered somebody in Iowa who played in the state of Iowa, he kind of conceded it. And it's like, that's tough. Because he was a very innovative coach and a guy who I always kind of thought that he believed he could outcoach the other guy. Well, at this level, I mean, Barry Switzer, Tom Osborne, those guys are pretty hard to outcoach. They're pretty good. And when they've got the Jimmies and the Joes on top of it, it was, and finally it just went to the point where, but Dan McCarney came in and he changed that mindset. It took a while to get real traction, but it happened.
Well, and props to the administration for not firing him. Right?
No question. I still remember 98. And so TCU had been like 1-10 the year before, and that was our opener.
And that was Gary Patterson, right? Wasn't he just getting started there?
I think so. I'm not sure whether he was still DC there or the head coach, but either way, they weren't, I think Pat Sullivan was the head coach, actually, a guy who'd been runner-up Heisman at Auburn as a quarterback. Anyway, he, after that game, which we lost, we were up 21-14 at half. I think, okay, here we go. And then we lose the game. Well, turns out TCU was not a 1-10 team. They ended up like 9-2 and had a freshman named LaDainian Tomlinson on that team, and some other really good players.
Yeah.
So the loss really wasn't that bad in hindsight, but at the moment it was bad. And we're going to Iowa the next week, and
like a 30-point underdog or whatever.
Whatever. And I'm thinking, man, I remember seeing Margie McCarney the night before the game, and I just said, hey, let's keep a good thought. Something good could happen. And we won. Okay, now still was not a phenomenal year. I think 4-7 maybe. But the Iowa game, after you've lost 15 in a row, you beat Iowa and Iowa City.
Convincingly.
That counts as 2.
Yeah.
That counts as an extra win for sure. So that, and the next year, just a little bit better, and set up the 2000 year. And then once again, hadn't been to a bowl in 22 years. I mean, how could you not? I mean, that was one of the most, even though a couple of the losses were bad in 2000, that was a glorious year. I mean, just because, how many teams hadn't been to a bowl game in 22 years?
Yeah.
And
this is back in an era where bowl games were huge. Like they were
absolutely
the postseason.
And I remember going to Phoenix for that one. That was just so fantastic. And the win, once again, doing it with my best friend, with Pete, and I still remember I can still hear his call of Jermaine Billups' punt return for a touchdown.
Oh yeah,
which was crazy. J.J. Moses gotten dinged. He was our punt returner. Jermaine Billups never returned a punt before.
Really?
So
I didn't know that.
And he was a freshman. I think he was a freshman, true freshman. And anyway, put him in, and boom, it was unbelievable.
Was the win in '98 your favorite, or would you have preferred 2002 with the Seneca Whitford comeback in Kinnick if you had to pick one?
I mentioned earlier recency bias.
Yeah.
That was Kyle Conradi's kick. So I'm guilty of that.
Well,
I would say
both are, but 98 and 2002 are just so iconic because it was the building of everything,
the 2002 was unbelievable, and
because that game was over.
I can still remember. I remember Brad Banks dropping the ball, and Tim Tabrink right there. But the one play that just sticks out is our buddy Jack Whitford's catch from Seneca Wallace in the end zone, running to his left and picking up an enormous first down. I mean, that was just what an iconic play. That is the play that stands out to me pretty much in all the Iowa State football game. I mean, just that one play. It wasn't a scoring play.
No.
But it was a game-changing play, and it was just fantastic.
Yeah, and it was in Jack too. We're very biased, but former walk-on Iowa kid, and we didn't realize at the time how good Iowa was.
No, we didn't.
Kind of like that TCU team you're talking about.
Exactly. I mean, you look back. I mean, it's just like when you look at all the rankings now. You say, how many top 25 wins do you have? Well, were they top 25 when you played them, or you look back?
Yeah.
And maybe you beat a team who's a top 25 team now. I mean, all those things are different. You don't really know how it's going to play out, but that was definitely the case where I thought, that was our fifth straight win in the series, from 98 to 2002. So it was like, we've kind of owned these guys anyway.
Mm-hmm. So the last thing I wanted to, because you brought up Pete, and I'm a media geek, admittedly, but I do think the audience will find this pretty interesting too. It's Scott Docterman did a really good piece on Iowa's situation for The Athletic like 4 or 5 years ago, But so it didn't used to be like, so Cyclone Radio Network, which you've been on for 44 years, it didn't used to be a Learfield thing, right? Like it was Clear Channel. Right. But there would be like any like local radio station could just show up and call an Iowa State game. How did that work?
They couldn't just show up. So what WI used to have the network, but also KRNT in 1970, that was Pete's first year.
WOI was TV5, right?
Public radio.
Oh, they had radio too. I didn't know that.
Right. It was WIFM. They still have it. I don't know. You're not a public radio guy?
Apparently not. My radio days, I think, are behind me. I'm pretty much all digital now. But I always thought WOI was like what ISU TV is now, right? Well, it used to be Channel 5.
It was Channel 5.
And then they moved it down to Des Moines.
But they still have public radio.
Okay, I didn't even know that.
Check it out. It's really good stuff. But anyway.
But I have NPR on my podcast.
Okay, so NPR is that's WI here in Central Iowa.
I didn't even know you could listen to it on the radio.
Oh, absolutely. So anyway, so WI.
We're learning something.
So WI did the games in 1970. Pete did football for the first time for KRNT Radio, and the next year he did basketball for the first time, which was my first varsity game.
So he was an employee of KRNT.
He was sports director at KRNT.
And they were out of where?
Des Moines.
Oh, so that's ESPN Radio now.
1350.
Yep, gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
So they broadcast the game.
You guys and your call numbers. I didn't.
Yeah, KMA also.
Warren Swain.
Warren Swain.
Yep.
And then
Icon.
then later Chuck Morris. Yeah.
Yep.
So those guys.
My old boss, Chuck.
Yeah. So those guys, Chuck used to be our sideline guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Going back.
Yeah. He used to tell me stories about you guys and your old Skyrider tours and stuff like that back when I worked with him.
Yep.
That sounds like a hell of a time, by the way, the old Skyrider.
I never went on the Skyrider.
Really?
No, but anyway, yeah, that was literally flying an old DC-3, I guess. I just heard the stories there too. But anyway, so there were 3 originators and the same, and even then, when I played, WHO would broadcast Iowa State basketball.
Really?
So they would do Iowa, and they would do select Iowa State games, and sometimes pretty much all the Big 8 games.
Who called those?
Well, if Iowa wasn't playing, Jim Zabel.
Really?
If Bob Earl, if Jim was doing an Iowa game, and sometimes there'd be a half-hour difference between the start of their game and our game. And they would air the first half of the Iowa game, and then our game would start, and then they would do the.
Wow.
It was kind of a crazy. It was a crazy time. Then in must have been 1980-ish. Iowa State said, "You know what? We're going to do. So we're going to go to an exclusive rights deal," and the winner was KIOA. Which is based in Des Moines, 940.
Yep.
And the general manager there was a guy named Ed Wodka. I don't know if you know the name Jeff Wodka. His son ended up being a tight end here.
Okay.
But Ed had played, big sports guy, played basketball at Bradley with Chet Walker. And anyway, loved sports. And so they won the rights. And so they had it for 3 years. And so no other station could broadcast, originated Cyclone broadcast. So, and then after that, after the 3 years were up, Ed had gone to Seattle. And so the new GM wouldn't have known a football from a tennis racket. So they weren't interested. And that's when Learfield had the rights. So Learfield had the rights for 5 years. And then after 5 years, Clear Channel got the rights. So, I did the games for all these.
Mm-hmm. So you just were going from one to the other.
Right. And Pete was play-by-play guy. And anyway, so, and then.
So when Pete was doing that, was he still at KRNT?
I'll say he was, KCCI. It was back then it was KRNT TV. They didn't change to KCCI.
Oh, okay.
Till later. But so
all makes sense.
He never worked at your KRNT.
And that's where Walters gets involved later on, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, when John was at Drake, Pete hired him and Chuck Reed and Jeff Johnson and those the Three Musketeers.
Absolutely.
So they worked with Pete there. So that was that connection. So Clear Channel had the rights from 1989 until I think spun us off. Clear Channel spun the sports off to Learfield like in 2006, maybe 6 or 6, somewhere in there. And Learfield's had it ever since. So Learfield's had it twice. Clear Channel once in the middle, but it started with KIOA.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So Pete was the first voice of the Cyclones.
Oh no.
Well, I mean exclusively.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
that is correct.
So, but back before the exclusive, there were like 3 or 4 guys that would just be calling these games.
George Turner, Frank Snyder. I mean, these guys.
So we've only had 2, like officially.
That's correct.
I like the historical aspect.
That's correct.
So like Iowa, like there's only been Zabel and Gary, like officially, but you had Brooks, you had
Ron Gonder.
Yep. And you had all these guys.
Frosty Mitchell. I mean,
I've heard of him. Yep.
They had
was like Frosty 4. His first name, or was that a nickname?
I assume it was a nickname.
It's a great name.
But he was one of the guys that started Adventureland.
Wow.
That voice you've heard over the years, you used to hear anyway, was him on the commercials.
Wow. Yeah, I'm such a media geek that I just really appreciate the grind of it. Best thing I ever did was go and work at KMA. Because it just
great radio station.
Oh, phenomenal. Locally owned. They just do
the May family.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But the whole having to be on the air at 5, me and Chuck Morris would start the day off for everybody.
But that,
it sucked. This was horrible. It about killed me, and I didn't have kids or a wife at the time. But I'd be out calling a high school basketball game, get back, cut up my audio, write the script. I'd be in bed at 12 if I'm lucky, and then have to be back in there at 4:30 to be on the air at 5. But at that area, this is why I always say these local radio guys are the hardest working people in the industry. They don't have anyone to set up their equipment. They do it all. Yeah. They're playing their own commercials. They don't have anyone bringing them stats. They're doing stats at the same time. It is a grind.
And it's getting worse.
Yeah.
I mean, local media in general is, it's phasing. I mean, you're talking about the digital world that we live in. And it's kind of phasing out a lot of things that I think are really essential to not just sports, but to democracy.
We need somebody covering city council meetings.
Has there ever been a scandal that was found out about without local media,
no.
shining a light on it? And the answer is no. And at least that's my opinion. And that's something that I think is a little distressing going forward with just lost so many people in the local media who performed not only entertaining things, but a tremendous public service.
I hope, my real hope here is that a lot of these stations will get bought up by local people in some capacity. The iHearts and Cumulus is the ones it breaks my heart that KASI is basically no longer in service. It's technically on the air, but they don't have a single, like the Ames Tribune. Isn't it crazy that a city like Ames doesn't have local media really anymore? I mean, technically it's there, but it's owned and run by the Register. They're not covering Ames School Board, and maybe they are.
Maybe they do.
If they are, but it's not what it used to be.
Right.
Put it that way.
And once again, no. And so much of this is hard to find. What's up, Diffie?
Yeah, that's the dog. If you hear a squeak toy in the bottom,
but yeah, that's it's driven by economics, obviously. And it's like some things are it should be more important, but at the end of the day, it's hard to quantify and hard to fund these things that revenue has gone away.
What we're doing here at Iowa Everywhere, I'll put it this way. Right now, we're pretty much exclusively sports. We're dipping into some other things. I could promise you, my goal is in 10 years that we're going to have people doing that. I'll promise you one thing, though. It's going to be a hell of a lot harder to monetize than what we're doing right now. Nobody, You guys, the amount of people who are willing to pay $10 a month to get sports content is pretty good. The amount of people willing to do it so that we're covering our local city council meeting, there's not many people who will do it.
Right.
They don't even click on it, right? Like because you're right. And then therein lies the problem where if it's not monetized, like a Gannett is like a hedge fund now, they're not really worried about what's going on in the Fort Dodge school district, you know?
Yeah.
Or it used to be like the KMAs of the world, they live there, right? Their kids go to school there. It's just so different.
I mean, your idea of local people buying these radio stations, and that sounds good. I just don't see it happening.
I don't either. I mean, that's my hope.
Yeah, but it's a good thought. I just don't know how workable.
What will have to happen is the big companies will just have to be to the point where we just want to unload them for pennies on the dollar,
right?
And say we're completely getting out of this, and then you have people who that kind of happened over in Shenandoah,
right?
Where Ed sold the station, but he didn't want to sell it to one of the big dogs. I don't know if he could have anyways, but a bunch of like five or six people from Shenandoah got together and just bought it, and now they're operating it. So that there is hope.
Is Mark Eno still?
Mark's not there anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was great to deal with.
Oh, he was the best. One of my favorite people I've ever got to work with. I hear from him about once a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love my time there, and Don Hansen and that
Sure.
Yeah, we have a lot of paths that crossed in that deal.
I mean, Don Hansen was a producer at Learfield the first time in the early 80s when I did the games for Learfield. Actually. That's cool. He was back when Learfield had like 4 schools. So
he taught me everything I know about I'm not a very good play-by-play guy, but he taught me because he didn't do it, but he was a geek about it. I mean, that guy would sit and listen to hundreds of guys do play-by-play, and he was really good at coaching it. And because I didn't want to ever be a play-by-play guy, I still don't. But like
we did okay in Bahamas.
Yeah, we did all right. Yeah, you're easy to work with. I enjoy doing it. But he was the one who made me do it because back there you can't really well be a sports director at a station like that if you're not out doing games. And I had never done it before, and he was the guy who kind of just pushed me into that world. Just a great. I can't say enough positive things about my time there. And that's why I long for it, and I try in what we're doing here. We really want to pay homage to what came before us, and we're not trying to be a vulture and kick all these people when they're down. It's a tough time out there.
Yeah.
We want to help. So,
yeah, I mean, just look at KXNO.
Yeah, it's tragic.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
No.
Anyways, well, hopefully we can talk maybe in a couple weeks and do a playoff preview.
Okay. Would love it. Would absolutely love it.
Well, I'm happy for you too. I know you're very keen on not making it about yourself, but it's a special deal. And even Pete, right? I don't know. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
He was up there with you, I'm sure, on Saturday night, and hopefully we can go and get one, and the Godfather as well. Just everybody involved. It's just you guys. I know you heard it, but what's funny, I'm sure that you've experienced this for 4 decades, is that you and John and Hark now, and of course Brunsey back in the day, people feel like they know you, even if they don't.
Yeah, I guess that's I've heard that.
Yeah. They feel like they're your best friend because they're going through it with you.
One of the things that had struck me, it was this summer, and somebody came up to me and kind of said that same thing and repeated a couple things that I had said on the air, which I didn't really remember. I just kind of make it up as I go. But I just thought, we're sitting there just like we are here today. We're doing a game. And we're talking into a microphone. We have maybe no one is even listening. We have no idea.
Yep.
And to have people who come up and say something to you, it's not annoying to me at all. It's just I really appreciate it because it validates. I remember when I was a kid, I was an Ohio State fan and I listened to the radio, and man, I knew those guys.
Yeah.
Football, basketball, whatever, and West Virginia too, because I was kind of halfway between, actually
Interesting.
closer to West Virginia. Okay. And my high school coach played at West Virginia, and he was from my hometown, and he played with Jerry West there. So I had I had a little connection there. So I could listen to their games. I could listen to Ohio State games, but baseball.
Baseball's the play-by-play guy who
Pittsburgh Pirates. I mean, I've been a Pittsburgh fan, Pirates, Steelers. Ever since, once again, grew up 100 miles from Pittsburgh. Love the Pirates. I would listen to every game. They'd play night games that would start at 11 o'clock Eastern time in LA. And I had that transistor under listening to Bob Prince and Jim Woods doing the game. And I mean, it's just.
Denny Matthews was my guy.
Yeah.
That guy put me to bed every night.
Yeah. I mean, so I kind of get it, having lived that when I was younger, and I still like to listen to play-by-play guys.
Yeah. It is amazing. It is amazing how that works. Like I can almost recite you and John's call of the 2011 Oklahoma State game off the top of my head. Like how those things will like stick with you.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and Bloom's like that. Like Bloom will pull out like just random Pete Taylor calls from the 4-7 season. Like he's an encyclopedia with those things. It's cool. We're lucky to have you, sir. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate your time.
I enjoy it. I appreciate all you do for Iowa State, and I know it's an act of love for you.
Absolutely. Well, it's the people, and you're part of that. So hopefully we'll get Eric back in here, and maybe we could do a playoff preview or something. We'll see. He is the great Eric Heft. Aiden Wyatt producing as always. Go out and buy yourself or a friend a bottle of Steeple Ridge Bourbon. There you go. Hefty's going to take one home. And we'll be back next week here on the CW Pod on Iowa Everywhere.